but I'll be right back. I got to piss. Actually, I'm just going to
Growing up in the suburbs, one of my favorite activities was to run around in my backyard as my friend John tried to shoot me in the head with a BB gun. Now, I don't want you to worry because we did switch places every couple of shots to make it fair, and obviously neither of us is blind because we could never shoot for shit. Now, I tell you this not to indict anyone's parents, but to demonstrate the kind of thing that you do when you don't have a car in the suburbs and you're a 40-minute walk from the nearest business, which, as it happens, is a dry cleaners. And I know it's not exactly a hot take to say the suburbs are boring, but in the next 30 years, America's population is projected to expand by 100 million. And if we try to spread all those people into suburbs, that means turning millions of acres of this and this into this. Well, there's an easy solution. We'll just also build things like apartments and townhouses.
I don't think I did. Maybe I did.
High-density housing for people who want it. And that would be the right answer, except for the fact that it's literally illegal to build anything but a single-family detached house in the majority of America. We don't build low-density, low-efficiency housing because America prefers it. We build them because housing developers are forced to because of a thing called single-family zoning. And yes, I'm asking you to watch a video about zoning, but don't worry because it's only like, holy shit, why is it so long? Why, just make it shorter. Okay, whatever. I'm gonna make this good because it's gonna take me like 80 hours to edit it. And if I wanted to waste 80 hours of my life watching some unfathomably boring shit, I would just watch
Yeah.
As the American population
The dork show.
expands and we're simultaneously trying to avoid being burned to the ground by climate change, we've got to be smarter about how we do housing. As countless studies show, higher density housing lowers our emissions, reduces traffic, increases access to services, the list goes on. But due to a bunch of old laws written by a handful of dead rich dudes, some of whom were racist, by the way, housing developers aren't free to build anything except for single.
I don't like it. I can't watch shit that's got a laugh track in it. Like, the laugh track just throws me off because that's all I can hear. I don't know why. It's like I come to expect it, and then I'm just waiting for it, and I get stuck. It's just annoying, bro. I can't do it.
Which means suburbs, and that means paving thousands of miles of new roads to McMansion-y housing developments, which means everyone will need a car, which means everyone needs more gas, and so on and so forth times 100 million. And there's an easy solution, and you can even help maybe? And speaking of help, I have enlisted the help of a personal hero of mine, city planning genius, Jason from the YouTube channel Not Just Bikes.
Hey, I'm Jason from Not Just...
That was Jason from... fudge.
Bikes.
That was Jason from Not Just Bikes. He's the brains, I'm the me, and me.
I don't like any of those.
Science and policy master's degree recipient, and a guy with the second lowest belt in taekwondo. So, watch yourself. And this is the story of how the suburbs are bleeding America dry, featuring Not Just Bikes. Welcome to Climate Town.
I don't like TV really anyways, so those type of like sitcoms were never my vibe.
Man, did I learn some shit about zoning. For one, it's actually a great concept. Don't put a toilet in your kitchen, don't put a heavy metal processing plant in your preschool district.
Well, a preschool district isn't really a thing as far as I know, but yeah, zoning is a critical part of good city design, and every modern city has some kind of zoning. Even Houston, which keeps all the bad stuff from the zoning code but just doesn't call it zoning. Here in the Netherlands, we have strict zoning codes that result in great cities, and Japanese zoning is famous for building compact urban environments while maintaining affordable housing prices.
Okay, enough international talk. It's time to focus on America. In the mid-1800s, or sepia times, factories started popping up in early American cities to crank out things like textiles and barrels and lung disease. Workers moved in nearby because the only way to get to work in those days was to either walk or... that was it, actually. You could walk or you could just die there in the street. Either way, let's get back on those looms, people. Your arms aren't going to tear themselves off. But even worse than that, the cities of the 1840s didn't have sewers, so you can probably imagine how that must have smelled. So
yeah, I guarantee the first zoning code they ever did was sewage, which is what he's probably about to say. But It makes sense because, I mean, you don't want to live in a place where your shit is just sitting on the fucking street. Like, no one wants to live like that.
City managers got their little top hats together and came up with land surveys to figure out how to move everyone's poop to a less lived-in location. And that meant figuring out where the sewers would go, and that's kind of the first comprehensive city planning. One thing led to another.
Cool.
And by 1867, a tenement house law was passed that required buildings to provide just the absolute barest of essentials to the people living there. And we're not talking like hot water. We're talking a fire escape and one outdoor toilet per 20 people.
Over the coming decades, city
Damn.
planning started to become a profession, and in 1909, the first National Conference on City Planning and the Problems of Congestion was held in Washington, D.C., with 49 attendees. This was back when congestion didn't mean traffic congestion. Suburbs started cropping up that were separate from the city but remained accessible to downtown by streetcar lines, and almost every city in America was built around trains and streetcars. Los Angeles, in particular, had one of the most extensive streetcar networks in the world. These so-called streetcar suburbs, at least those that still remain, are still some of the most desirable neighborhoods in all of North America. In many ways, this was peak city planning. With the invention of the automobile, suddenly wealthier people could live even farther away and drive in and out of cities for work, and the American suburb was born.
And that's when things got racist.
It's been 1 week since you looked at me.
Actually, no, that's when things got more racist.
Right.
It's been
No, that's not true.
Because white people with money, they wanted to move to suburbs because they wanted to move away from poor people. And a lot of the poor people back then were people of color. So they would take their money and move far away, build their houses, and then they would make the houses around those houses too expensive for poor people to buy them. And then with their cars, you know, they would drive. You know, poor people can't get to their house, so they would have to drive back and forth to get from their home to wherever they're going, which is why public transportation stopped being built. That's why we have such a poor infrastructure in transportation here, because so many people just want to fucking drive. You know, public transportation isn't allowed to go into a lot of these places. That's why there's not bus stops in the middle of cul-de-sacs, because it doesn't, you know, they just don't go there.
That's when racism got suburbanized. See, in the mid-1910s, it was just straight up okay to have a city ordinance that explicitly prohibited people from buying property if they were black or Jewish or Asian. Or
That doesn't help either.
Come up with a list of people
No.
who were discriminated against.
No.
Especially not when city ordinances have it all written down.
There's a bus that travels around, but it only goes to certain areas, you know. And it's not very good, you know. Public transportation in America is garbage across the board. There's only a few places, like New York, I guess you can say is somewhat decent. But fuck, I don't know if you heard, we just had a fucking mass shooting in the subway. Like a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Just some dude went down there, threw smoke gas, tear gas everywhere, and just started fucking murdering motherfuckers. Actually, he didn't murder anybody. At least the last time I checked, he actually didn't kill anybody. So, that's impressive.
Hey, sorry, can you guys, we're trying to do a shot. Thank you so much. Would you just right down that way? Thanks, you're the best. Other cities, like San Francisco, I guess felt less comfortable being overtly racist, but were still completely into the idea of passing racist laws. So they developed a zoning practice known as R1 zoning.
Redlining. They used to redline. Oh, well, it was coined redlining, basically saying like, you have to build houses that are like poor. You have to build like poor houses, and then you have to buy like expensive houses, and they would zone it to where they would force the poor people to go live in a specific area, i.e. black people, because black people weren't allowed to buy specific houses because they were either A, too expensive, or B, couldn't afford it. I mean, because they were just simply black. They like just would not sell them the houses because they were black. Which is why we still have impoverished people living in America that are still affected by this exact same thing that was founded fucking 100 years ago, almost.
San Francisco-based real estate developer Duncan McDuffie developed a tactic of maintaining white-only neighborhoods by subdividing them into sections where it was only legal to build big, expensive single-family homes. The honor of the first official single-family house zone belongs to California's...
We don't even need to watch this. I know exactly what's going to happen. Like, I already know this.
Elmwood
Come on.
Park, which was specifically designed to prevent a black dance hall from opening. So, way to go, Duncan McDuffie. You had a perfect name. It's goofy, it's fun, it's good at parties, and you blew it. In 1917, the Supreme Court ruled in Buchanan versus Worley that a city ordinance in Kentucky prohibiting the sale of property to black people in white-majority neighborhoods was a violation of the 14th Amendment and therefore unlawful. But don't cry, cities seeking to enforce racist zoning, because R1 zoning is technically just classist. Which means even though you can't explicitly ban certain races from homeownership, they could just switch to banning poor people from those same rights, and then let racist property developers deny black homeownership for discretionary reasons. And this racist turned classist but still racist kind of zoning took off all across America.
At this point in time, zoning still had detractors across the US, mostly by people who claimed it interfered with personal property rights, which, I mean, yeah, it kinda did. But all this changed with a landmark ruling in the village of Euclid, Ohio. Euclid wanted to keep Chicago's factories from expanding toward them and changing the character of the village, and ultimately the Supreme Court agreed. They ruled that this kind of zoning was not an unreasonable extension of the village's police power. This kind of zoning became known as Euclidean zoning, named after the town and not Euclidean geometry, and the concept spread like a bad meme across the country and into Canada too. This was the first step toward the homogeneous, sprawling, asphalt-covered, car-infested Strode Line horror show that makes up the majority of cities and towns in the US and Canada today.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear,
Fucking
Euclidean
parking lot
zoning
hell.
was not explicitly racist. Presumably, it was more about the factories themselves than the people working in those factories. Presumably.
Now that's not to say zoning stopped being racist in the 20s, when America went through a depression that they all agreed was pretty great. FDR came out with the New Deal, which included a hot little number called the National Housing Act of 1934, which established brand new homeownership tools for low-income Americans like the 30-year mortgage and low-interest loans guaranteed by the government. Unless you happen to live in a neighborhood with too high a percentage of foreign-born or Negroes, according to the U.S. government. In
Foreign?
Which case, you could...
Foreign-born or Negroes. God. The amount of just like sheer racism that we used to express openly is fucking terrifying. Like that was written down. If you are an immigrant or black, we can't do it. Sorry.
Couldn't get a loan because
God,
you lived
that's
in a
fucking
red zone,
crazy.
which is where the term redlining came from. So, okay,
Yep.
yeah, maybe a racist law from the early 1900s invented to keep non-white people from property ownership may have accidentally determined how almost all housing would develop in the most powerful country in the world. And fine, it is a little ironic that we are not free to build apartments or townhouses in most parts of the freest country in the world. But are those things really preventing us from acting on climate change? Yes. Yes, they super are. Now, I just want to say, there's nothing inherently wrong with wanting to live in a detached single-family
You're just
home.
goating you to
Some
the
people
answer.
love 'em, and to that I say, whatever gets you out of bed in the morning, brother.
Brother. I'm aware of how destiny is gonna take its course, brother.
But the fact that 75% of all residential land is zoned for only detached single-family homes leads to a real problem when it comes to trying to keep our carbon dioxide emissions down and stave off early onset
I've heard
climate
this.
change. The suburbs represent less than a...
Because each individual house has to maintain its heat and the uses of electricity and all that stuff, as to where like apartment buildings, you know, you can stack many homes on top of each other, which the heat stays insulated better than each individual home. It uses less power, which means less fossil fuels, which means yada yada yada.
The quarter of the American population, but are so energy intensive that they account for more than half of all household greenhouse gas emissions. Detached houses are the least efficient kind of housing to try to heat or cool because they're leaking energy from all four sides simultaneously. The heating and electric bills in detached single-family houses are consistently higher, which leads to power plants burning more fossil fuels, which means more carbon dioxide emissions.
Crazy.
And it also leads to things like blackouts. And that's just right now. Imagine a few more decades of being forced to move out and out further instead of just building up like 4 stories. See, when you build up, you build stairs, you build elevators, and sometimes just fireman poles. But when you build out, you build miles upon miles of roads and streets and cul-de-sac, which I recently found out is the plural of cul-de-sac. Who knew?
Wait, what? Holy shit, you're right. How did I not know that?
Those roads get built right over dirt and plants, and once it's asphalt, it no longer has the trivial quality of being able to absorb rainwater to prevent things like flash floods or water pollution. And since the construction of a single mile of asphalt road in America adds 4,000 tons of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, building out instead of up is an excellent way to ensure we blow past every single emissions reduction targets from here until 2050. And of course, once you have roads instead of stairs, you're putting thousands of cars onto those shiny new roads because those suburbs are almost universally cut off from functional public transportation. There are sometimes bus routes, but decades of underinvestment in public transportation means a 15-minute car ride becomes a 2-hour commute via 3 buses, a light rail, and a goddamn rickshaw. And of course, all those cars need someplace to park when you're at work, which means parking lots, which means concrete and carbon dioxide emissions, a reduction in natural spaces that can absorb that spike in carbon dioxide, and a sharp increase in places for the sharks and the jets to knife fight to the death. And as things spread farther and farther out, access to everything from food to medical services and emergency services gets more expensive and more carbon intensive. And just to be clear, eliminating R1 zoning does not mean eliminating the single-family detached house. It just means developers are literally allowed to build something other than a detached house if people want it. Since only 25% of all residential land is allowed to be not a house, developers are fighting over scraps, and the ones who are winning those fights are often the bougie high-rise developers with the lawyers and the money to wade through mountains of red tape and secure artificially scarce land rights. And that leads to this distinct feature in American cities. Suburbs, 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 and then boom, skyscrapers. Out of nowhere, you hit the end of the R1 zone and it's chaos. And it's basically this way in like every American city.
In Europe, it's very common to see a wide range of different building sizes, single-family homes, duplexes, 4 to 5-story mid-rise buildings, and even the occasional larger apartment or condo building. If the majority of residential land in the US and Canada wasn't zoned for R1 single-family homes, you'd see a lot more different sizes and uses here too. There has been a huge increase in demand for mixed-use walkable places as people start to realize that these places are just better places to be. They result in urban environments that are at a human scale, safe, enjoyable, and comfortable to be in. And you don't need to spend all your time stuck in soul-crushing traffic to do normal everyday things like visiting friends or buying a bag of milk. Unfortunately, there are very few truly walkable neighborhoods.
It's one of the main things I hate about going like to big cities. You struggle to enjoy it because of the just like congestion of vehicles in a lot of the places. Like there's just vehicles everywhere, and like just that one image like this, it's so fucking nice, dude. If this was America, there'd be a fucking car parked all down this road, you know, cars all over here, cars fucking on the other side. It's a fucking mess, dude. This looks it looks nice, man. It looks nice.
Visiting to its left has resulted in skyrocketing housing prices for this limited stock. Not everyone is going to want to live in a mixed-use walkable neighborhood, but it's clear that a lot of people do, and given that these places are better for our health, our city finances, and the environment, it would be crazy of us not to capitalize on this trend. Our city should be removing all of the outdated zoning and car-centric regulations that have trapped us in car dependence, and start building more of these walkable neighborhoods as fast as possible.
Yeah, I also heard him say bag of milk. It's not a thing, right?
Hell yeah, it is.
Why is this a thing? For real, I'm genuinely angry now. It's inconvenient, it doesn't stack, if you set it down, it spills milk everywhere.
'Cause it's a bag of milk.
Is the single
It's
family
epic.
housing of the beverage carrying world. For real. Whatever. When an area is zoned as mixed use, it doesn't mean you can go right back to building a sewer through your daycare center. Mixed use zoning still has a ton of regulations, it's just not as wildly restrictive as single family housing only. Actually, where I grew up, there's an area of mixed use zoning called Belmar, and we can go there right now through the magic of editing. Magic of editing. Here's a real world example of mixed use zoning in America. You got apartments right next to a movie theater, right next to a whole bunch of restaurants, right next to a school. Now this place I'm standing right now used to be a big shitty parking lot for a big shitty mall called Villa Italia.
Things had started to change, and by the early 90s, the signs of decline were obvious.
Its retail activity peaked in 1994.
Actually, it was devastating. We'd have a store leave and not come back, and then another.
Fun fact, my friend Eric Rosa did one time get away from the cops riding a skateboard through a parking garage, so it's not all bad. But once they shut the mall down, they redeveloped this area into a fun, walkable, livable zone that is one monologue away from not one, not three, but two grocery stores. And
That's
now it's
cool.
one of the most sought after areas to live in Colorado because it's kind of fun to live here. And it generates
That's
a whole
really
bunch
cool.
more money for the city than a parking lot for a struggling mall. I mean, the best store was J.C. Penney's. Who's gonna go to that?
Brother, you're a cheap shot artist. You take whatever you can get as
Right.
quick as you want. You were never in my corner. You were always on the outside, waiting for me to make the first move.
So while the landscape of America is
See, I live 10 minutes from work, and I have drove probably like an hour and 20 minutes is the farthest I've ever drove to get to work, and I hate it. Like, I hate it. Living only 10 minutes from my job is probably one of the best things I've ever done for myself. Like, I absolutely love it. I hate that hour drive every day. That shit sucks.
currently just dominated by the lowest efficiency, lowest density kind of housing, cities all across the US are slowly starting to eliminate that zoning code and allow for more types of buildings to be made. Cities like Minneapolis and Los Angeles and even the state of Oregon have loosened their single-family regulations, and you can help keep that going. There are a ton of ballot initiatives all across America and progressive groups looking to reform zoning, link in the bio, but you can also show up to your local zoning meetings and really raise hell about zoning practices. They look something like this.
So last time we tried to get a bit of a feel for what you wanted.
It just doesn't fit in the character of the neighborhood, but it just doesn't fit, and it sticks out like an eyesore.
The meetings are usually full of people who are terrified that their neighborhood might change even a little bit, and the only perspective they ever get to hear is their own.
Absolutely. I have been to a few of these community engagement meetings, and I have often been the youngest person there by about 30 years, and I'm not young. These meetings really do cater to the retired and bored demographic, and the general consensus is usually that the whippersnappers need to get off their lawns.
So consider showing up to one of these meetings and advocating for mixed-use zoning. Or you can talk about how punishingly inconvenient and wasteful single-family housing is. Remember, this isn't about taking away anyone's detached house, it's about giving people the option to live more efficiently and in a more fulfilling way.
All right,
It's about
we'll do one short video. I'm hungry. I'm going to go grab a bowl of food.
Thanks,
We're gonna
YouTube,
put
for
some on
watching.
and watch
If you liked the
something.
video, like, subscribe, and share it. Thank you so much. Did you like that?
Is it good? Do I need to run it back?